I used to think I was being dramatic. That maybe I was imagining things or expecting too much. But when the people who are supposed to love you the most constantly make you feel like a ghost in your own family, it's hard not to question everything. I'm Ellie. I'm 26 now, but I've spent most of my life feeling like I was standing behind a glass wall, watching my family celebrate someone else, my older brother, Evan. He's always been the golden boy. The one who could do no wrong, even when he absolutely did. I've never been jealous of Evan. Not really. He's charming, confident, and always knows exactly what to say. But as we grew up, it became impossible not to notice the stark difference in how we were treated. When Evan wanted a car for his 16th birthday, he got a brand new silver SUV with a giant red bow on it. When I turned 16, I got a used bike and a reminder to be responsible with my money. I worked through high school. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. I saved up for every school trip, every textbook, and every college application fee. My parents told me it was good for me, character building, they said. Meanwhile, Evan got his entire college tuition covered by them without ever having to lift a finger. He dropped out halfway through and decided to find himself by backpacking through Europe. They still brag about his adventurous spirit. When I graduated from college, with honors, I invited my family to the ceremony. Only my mom showed up, and even then, she left right after the photos. No dinner. No celebration. No "we're proud of you." Evan didn't call or text. I remember sitting in my apartment afterward, eating takeout alone in my cap and gown, trying not to cry. Still, I told myself to suck it up. Maybe that was just how families were. Maybe I was too sensitive, or maybe I didn't try hard enough to be seen. So I kept showing up. Holidays, birthdays, family dinners, I was always there, helping in the kitchen, cleaning up, buying thoughtful gifts no one noticed. Then came my birthday last year. It was a quiet Saturday. I hadn't expected much, but I still showed up at my parents' house. I brought a cake I'd made myself and a bottle of wine. Evan was already there, surrounded by our parents, telling stories about his latest business idea that would probably fail like the last 5. When I walked in, no one even said happy birthday. I smiled through it, pretending not to care, and placed the cake on the counter. Eventually, my mom handed me a small box. I was surprised, they rarely gave me gifts. I opened it, only to find nothing. Just an empty velvet-lined box. No note. No explanation. Just a hollow box and awkward silence. I looked around, waiting for someone to laugh or say it was a mistake. But nothing came. My dad was already asking Evan if he wanted more lasagna. My mom was refilling his glass. I stood there, holding an empty box, feeling like a fool. I quietly put the lid back on, excused myself, and went home. I cried for hours that night. Not because of the box itself, but because it confirmed what I'd felt for years. I wasn't really part of this family. I was just there. An extra. That night changed something in me. It was like a switch flipped. I stopped making excuses for them. I stopped trying to explain away their neglect. I wasn't dramatic or needy. I was just exhausted, emotionally worn down by a lifetime of being second, or rather, invisible. Growing up, I was the one who helped my mom when she was sick. I cleaned the house when she was too tired. I helped Dad with his taxes and drove Evan home from parties when he was too drunk to drive. I picked up the slack whenever they needed someone. But when I needed something, anything, it was radio silence. I don't know if they realized how much it hurt. I don't even think they saw it. That's the cruelest part. They didn't hate me. They just didn't see me. I began journaling after that birthday. Every memory, every time I felt pushed aside, I wrote it down. Not to hold a grudge, but to validate my own reality. I needed to remind myself that what I felt was real. That I wasn't imagining the years of imbalance, of being the family's emotional and practical support system without ever receiving the same care in return. The hardest part wasn't the lack of gifts or the missed celebrations. It was the feeling of not mattering. Of being present, helpful, loving, and still being forgotten. At work, I thrived. My boss praised me for my leadership. My friends leaned on me and celebrated my wins. But at home, I was just the girl who showed up, cleaned up, and disappeared. The only thing I ever wanted from them was acknowledgement. Just once, to hear "Ellie, we're proud of you," or "Ellie, we see how hard you're working." But those words never came. And now, as another birthday approaches, I feel the familiar mix of dread and disappointment. But this time, I'm different. This time, I have a plan. I've been quiet for too long, letting my pain simmer under the surface. But not anymore. Because I've realized something: I don't need their approval to have worth. I don't need their attention to exist. I may have spent my whole life being overlooked, but I'm finally ready to be seen, by myself, if no one else. There's only so much silence a person can take before it starts to echo back in sharp, deafening ways. After the empty birthday box incident, something in me broke. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a quiet, final kind of way. The kind that makes you wake up and realize you've been bleeding slowly for years, and it's finally time to stop pretending the wounds aren't there. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake replaying moments I had long buried, times I'd smiled through gritted teeth, brushed off tears with forced laughter, or swallowed the sting of feeling like an outsider in my own family. I kept thinking, why do I keep letting them do this to me? And then I stopped asking why and started asking what now? So I did what I've always done: I got organized. I pulled out a box from the back of my closet, one I hadn't touched in years. It was filled with old letters, photos, receipts, and printouts of emails and texts. Most people would think it was overkill, but for me, it was survival. Proof that I wasn't imagining things. Evidence of the disparity. Birthday texts they forgot to send. Messages asking for help with no thank you in return. Screenshots of conversations where I was clearly just a convenience, never a priority. It was all there. I spent a whole weekend combing through the years, categorizing moments. One folder was labeled favors: rides I'd given Evan, errands I'd run for our parents, things I'd bought for family events when no one offered to pitch in. Another folder was celebrations, where I listed what I did for their birthdays versus what they did for mine. The difference was laughable, if it wasn't so sad. And then, at the center of it all, I wrote the letter. It wasn't a rant. I wasn't trying to shame them or make them cry. I just wanted them to finally understand the impact of their actions, or lack thereof. I poured everything into that letter: the heartbreak, the quiet resentment, the years of invisible service, and most of all, the aching loneliness that came from never feeling truly loved or seen by the people who were supposed to care the most. Here's a piece of what I wrote. For years, I've watched you celebrate Evan like he hung the stars, while I was the one cleaning up after the party. I've driven him home drunk, lent him money, listened to his problems, and applauded his smallest achievements, even when no one noticed mine. You praised him for dreaming while telling me to be practical. I never needed gifts. I just needed to matter. It took me hours to finish that letter. Every word was deliberate. Every sentence a release. I cried halfway through, not because I was sad, but because I finally felt free, like I was unburdening myself of the weight I'd carried my whole life. The timing wasn't an accident. My birthday was coming again. Another chance for them to ignore me, minimize me, or pretend nothing was wrong. But not this year. This year, I wouldn't play along. I wasn't going to wait around for a last-minute text or a pity dinner where I'd end up washing dishes while everyone else watched TV. This time, I would be the one to set the tone. I would show up, but on my terms. So I made copies of the letter, 3, to be exact. One for Mom, one for Dad, and one for Evan. I slipped each into a plain envelope and wrote their names on the front. Then I bought myself something I never thought I would: a suitcase. It wasn't fancy, but it was sturdy. I filled it with the essentials: clothes, my favorite books, important documents, and that little velvet box from last year. I wasn't sure where I'd go just yet, but I knew one thing for certain. I was leaving. Not just their house or that birthday dinner, I was leaving the role they'd assigned me. The silent one. The helper. The afterthought. I was done. In the days leading up to my birthday, I said nothing to them. I didn't hint at plans or ask if they remembered. I went to work like usual, smiled when I needed to, but inside, I felt this quiet power growing. I wasn't waiting to be loved anymore. I was finally loving myself enough to walk away. On the morning of my birthday, I woke up early, made myself a nice breakfast, and stood by the window with my coffee, watching the city wake up. I felt calm. Lighter. Like for the first time, I was standing up in my own life instead of sitting quietly on the sidelines. Then I got dressed, grabbed the envelopes, and headed to my parents' house. They were having one of their usual weekend brunches: eggs, toast, Evan talking loudly about some new investment he didn't understand. They looked surprised to see me but not particularly excited. "Hey, Ellie," my dad said without looking up from his newspaper. "Didn't think you'd come," Mom added. I didn't answer right away. I just reached into my bag, pulled out the envelopes, and handed one to each of them. "What's this?" Evan asked, raising an eyebrow. "A gift," I said, my voice steady. "For all of you." They looked confused. Mom started to open hers, but I stopped her. "Read them after I leave," I said. "I just wanted you to know, I won't be doing this anymore." "Doing what?" my dad asked, genuinely clueless. "Being invisible," I said. "Playing the role you expect of me." And with that, I turned around, walked out the door, and didn't look back. I didn't know how they would react. I didn't care. For once, I wasn't looking for their approval or waiting for their apology. I had given them the truth. What they did with it was up to them. But me? I was done waiting. Done hoping. Done hurting. This was the breaking point. And finally, I was ready to heal. The air was strangely calm as I stood on the front porch of my parents' house, holding two things in my hands, a homemade chocolate cake and an envelope that weighed more than anything I'd ever carried. It wasn't just paper inside. It was everything I had never said. Everything I had swallowed to keep the peace. I took a breath, forced a smile, and rang the doorbell. The house was exactly the same as it always had been. The smell of cinnamon toast, coffee, and my mother's favorite vanilla candle greeted me like a memory I wasn't sure I wanted to remember. Inside, laughter echoed from the kitchen. Evan's voice boomed, so I told my manager, "If I'm not getting a bonus, I'm walking." And guess what? I got the bonus. Mom laughed. Dad chuckled like a man proud of his son's bravado. No one noticed I was standing there until I cleared my throat. Mom turned first. "Oh. Ellie. Didn't know you were coming." "Surprise," I said softly, holding up the cake. "I brought dessert." "That's sweet," Dad said. "Is it Evan's favorite?" I blinked. "No," I said, walking into the kitchen. "It's mine." They didn't even flinch. I placed the cake gently on the counter, then took out the envelope and set it beside it. I looked at each of them, my mother, who always seemed more concerned with appearances than emotions. My father, who believed silence was strength. And Evan, my golden boy brother who could do no wrong. "It's my birthday," I said simply. A silence fell over the room. Mom looked confused. "Is it really? Already?" Dad cleared his throat awkwardly. "We thought it was next week." Evan offered a half smile. "Well, happy birthday, I guess." I nodded, not even surprised anymore. "I'm not here for a celebration," I said, my voice steady. "I'm here to read something." I took the envelope and pulled out the folded letter I had rewritten a dozen times, making sure it said exactly what I needed it to. My hands didn't shake. "Not this time. I need you to hear me," I said. "And I'm going to say this once." They looked at each other warily but said nothing. So I began. "Dear Mom, Dad, and Evan. For most of my life, I've watched you love each other out loud while I stood in the corner, unnoticed. Evan got your tears, your money, your pride. I got your silence, your expectations, and your disappointment." Mom's lips parted like she was about to protest, but I held up my hand and kept going. "I'm not writing this to shame you. I'm writing it because I've carried the weight of your indifference for too long. I was the one who stayed quiet. Who helped clean up after every party. Who drove Evan home when he got drunk. Who paid for her own textbooks while you bought Evan a car. I did it all without asking for anything, just hoping you'd see me." Evan scoffed lightly under his breath. "You think you're the only one who struggled?" he muttered. I looked him in the eye. "No. But I'm the only one who was told not to complain." I turned back to the letter. "You've made it clear, year after year, that I am not the favorite. You forgot birthdays. You dismissed accomplishments. You asked for favors and offered no thanks. And last year, you gave me a box, empty, on my birthday, as a joke. No one explained it. No one apologized. You all just laughed." Mom's face turned red, but she stayed silent. "This letter isn't asking for an apology. I don't expect one. This is me returning the things I've carried, the ignored messages, the one-sided conversations, the feeling of being less than. I'm done trying to earn a love that should have been given freely." I paused, feeling the heat rise behind my eyes but refusing to cry. "From now on, I will not be the quiet daughter who waits to be noticed. I will not chase after your affection. I will not bend myself into silence to make this family comfortable. I deserve more." I folded the letter and set it on the table. The silence that followed was suffocating. Mom looked stunned, almost betrayed. "Ellie. Why didn't you say something before? I did, I said. You just didn't hear me. Dad rubbed the back of his neck. You've always been so independent. We thought you didn't need much. I didn't need things, I said. I needed to feel like I mattered. Evan stood up, agitated. This is ridiculous. You're acting like some kind of victim. I'm not a victim, I replied. I'm someone who finally found her voice. He rolled his eyes and left the room. My mother took a step forward, unsure of what to say. I'm sorry if we made you feel. Stop, I said. Don't say if. You did make me feel that way. And that's what I need you to understand. She blinked, lips trembling, but I could see it in her eyes. She hadn't seen me until now. Not really. I'm not staying, I said, picking up my purse. I just wanted to leave you with the truth. I looked at the cake, untouched. That's for you. But I won't be here when you cut it. With that, I walked to the door, my steps steady, my shoulders light. I didn't look back. Outside, the wind felt different. Fresh. Clean. Like a long-awaited breath after years underwater. I didn't know what would happen next. Whether they would talk about me, cry, dismiss it all, or pretend it never happened. But none of that mattered. Because I had finally said it. I had finally been heard. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I felt powerful. This was no longer their story. It was mine. The door clicked softly behind me, but its sound echoed like thunder in my chest. I stood on the front porch for a moment, taking in the stillness of the outside world. Inside that house, time seemed frozen, stuck in the same cycle of favoritism, emotional distance, and unspoken wounds. But out here, under the fading orange of the early evening sky, something shifted. Something inside me was finally, completely free. I didn't rush to my car. I didn't cry. I didn't look back to see if someone had followed me out. For the first time, I didn't need any of that. The walk down the driveway felt longer than usual. Maybe it was the emotional weight I had just shed, or maybe it was the surreal realization that this was the first birthday I had ever spent choosing myself. No fake smiles. No quiet tears in the bathroom. No pretending I was okay with being ignored. I reached my car, unlocked it, and slid into the driver's seat. The silence was thick, but not suffocating. It was mine. It didn't belong to them. As I started the engine, I half expected my mom to burst through the front door, maybe with some kind of apology or desperate attempt to patch things up. But the door stayed closed. No one came out. No one called my name. And I was okay with that. Because I hadn't walked into that house hoping to be begged to stay. I had walked in to speak my truth. And I had done exactly that. As I pulled away from the curb, I glanced at the house in the rearview mirror. It was just a house now. Not a home. Not a place I belonged. Just bricks and windows and a roof covering people who never really saw me. Back at my apartment, I placed my keys on the hook by the door and kicked off my shoes. The quiet space wrapped around me like a soft blanket. I lit a candle, vanilla scented, ironically, and sat at my kitchen table. There was no birthday party, no pile of gifts, no slice of cake cut in my honor. But there was peace. I made myself a simple dinner, nothing fancy, just something warm, and pulled out the letter I had printed twice. The original copy had been left on their kitchen counter. This one was mine. I read it again, slowly, letting each word settle. There was a time when I would have crumbled under the weight of their silence. When the lack of response would have left me questioning myself, wondering if I'd overreacted, if I was being dramatic or ungrateful. But not tonight. Their silence was loud. But my voice had been louder. And I realized something, maybe I had been strong all along. It wasn't that I had suddenly become brave. It was that I had finally stopped making myself small to protect their comfort. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was a message from Aunt Lila, my mom's younger sister. Happy birthday, sweetheart. I know things are complicated with your parents, but I hope you did something for you today. You've always deserved more than they ever gave you. Proud of you. I blinked, surprised. Aunt Lila had always been the quiet observer at family events, never saying much but watching closely. I hadn't expected her to reach out. Thank you, I replied. I spoke my truth today. I didn't get a reaction. But I feel lighter. Her response came quickly. That's the gift. Not their reaction, your freedom. I stared at those words. She was right. I didn't need tears, apologies, or grand confessions. The strength wasn't in changing them, it was in releasing myself from the hope that they ever would. Later that night, I curled up on the couch with a cup of tea and let the silence of my apartment wash over me. I didn't feel lonely. I felt whole. I thought about all the birthdays before this one, how I used to sit quietly, pretending not to care when everyone fussed over Evan. How I'd clean up the wrapping paper, serve the cake, and offer polite smiles while my own heart sat heavy in my chest. I thought about the box from last year, the one with nothing inside. A gift meant to humiliate, disguised as a joke. Not this year. This year, I brought the truth. This year, I left with dignity. The next morning, I got up early and walked to the coffee shop down the street. The barista greeted me with a cheerful smile. "Good morning. What can I get started for you?" "A large vanilla latte, please," I said, smiling back. She rang me up, and as I waited, I pulled out a small notebook from my bag. It was new, something I'd bought last week on a whim. The first page was blank. "Until now," I wrote. "Day 1, I chose myself." Just those 4 words. But they felt like a foundation. I didn't know what the days ahead would bring. Maybe my parents would call. Maybe Evan would send a half-hearted message. Or maybe they'd do what they always had, ignore what made them uncomfortable. But I wouldn't be going back. Not to that role. Not to that silence. If they ever wanted to rebuild a relationship, it would be on different terms, with me as I truly am, not the version they preferred, quiet, compliant, invisible. Back at home, I placed the notebook on my nightstand, where I could see it every morning. A small reminder that the strongest thing I'd ever done wasn't surviving years of emotional neglect, it was walking away from it with my head held high. Their silence didn't hurt me anymore. Because I had found my own voice. And I was never giving it up again. The apartment was quiet, lit only by the warm glow of the kitchen light and the soft flicker of a single candle standing tall on a small, store-bought cake. Ellie sat at her modest table, a glass of sparkling cider in hand, the faint scent of vanilla floating through the air. It wasn't much, but it was hers. She stared at the little flame, steady and calm. No chaos. No awkward silences masked by fake smiles. No waiting for someone to remember, to notice, to care. This time, she wasn't waiting for anyone. She smiled, not because someone told her to, but because something inside her felt finally, unmistakably right. This was her birthday. Her real birthday. The first one where she wasn't shrinking to fit into a space that was never made for her. She took a deep breath and made a silent wish. But it wasn't really a wish. It was a promise. No more pretending. With that, she blew out the candle, watching as the smoke curled into the air and disappeared. She cut a slice of cake and took a bite. Sweet. Soft. Simple. It was perfect. Ellie leaned back in her chair and looked around her apartment. It was small, yes, but it was filled with things she had chosen herself. A soft gray couch. Shelves lined with books she loved. A faded Polaroid of her and her college roommate from a trip to the coast. A watercolor painting she'd done on a rainy Sunday afternoon. It was quiet here, but never empty. Tonight, she wasn't lonely. She was full of something she hadn't had in years, peace. Her phone vibrated on the table beside her. A message. It was from her friend Maya. "Happy birthday, Elle. I know you said you wanted to spend today on your own, but just wanted to say I love you and I'm proud of you. You deserve every good thing." Ellie smiled, her heart warming. Maya had always been her rock, never loud, never pushy, just steady. She typed back. "Thank you. Today's been peaceful. I finally feel like myself." Another message popped up almost instantly. "That's the best gift you could ever give yourself. We'll celebrate this weekend. Just us, okay?" "Okay," Ellie replied, and set the phone down. She pulled her knees up to her chest on the couch and wrapped herself in a knitted throw. The candle had gone out, but the warmth lingered. Her mind drifted, not backward, not to the faces that stayed silent or the hands that never reached out, but forward. There were so many things she wanted to do now. She picked up her journal and opened to a fresh page. "Things I'm choosing for me," she wrote at the top. 1. Speak my truth, even if it makes others uncomfortable. 2. Build relationships that nourish, not drain. 3. Make art again, paint, draw, write without fear. 4. Celebrate my wins, even the small ones. 5. Never apologize for existing loudly. 6. Let go of needing to be understood by people who never tried. 7. Love myself on purpose. She paused after writing the last one. It lingered in her chest like a warm light. Love myself on purpose. It sounded simple. But it was revolutionary. For so long, she had begged for crumbs of affection from people who barely saw her. Now, she was done begging. She was done shrinking. She was done trying to fit into a narrative that cast her as unimportant. She was the author now. And this was a new chapter. The next morning, the sun streamed through her windows, soft and golden. She got out of bed without checking her phone. No anxious scrolls. No dread. She brewed her coffee and stood by the window, watching the world wake up. Across the street, an old man walked his dog. A girl rode past on a bright red bike. Life continued, ordinary and beautiful. She sat down with her coffee and opened her laptop. There was a folder she'd left untouched for years, dream projects. Inside were unfinished stories, half-sketched illustrations, and a list of goals she had once buried beneath the weight of family expectations. She clicked it open and began reading. Some of it made her laugh, how young she had been, how hopeful. Some of it made her pause. There were ideas here that still sparked something deep inside. She began typing. Just a few lines at first. Then more. The words came slowly, like rain after a long drought. She didn't stop to edit. She didn't doubt herself. She just wrote. Hours passed. When she finally leaned back, she had the first 3 pages of a new story. A story about a girl who learns to leave the people who never saw her, and builds a new life out of the pieces she once hid away. A little on the nose, maybe. But true. And this time, she wasn't writing for anyone else's approval. She was writing for herself. Later that day, she called Maya and made plans for a small dinner. No big crowd, just the people who really mattered. She texted her therapist and scheduled a new session. She reached out to her art teacher from years ago, someone who had always believed in her, and asked about local classes. Each step was small. But it was forward. And that was everything. That evening, she found the card her grandfather had once given her, years ago, when he was still alive. It had been tucked away in a box for a long time. To my strong, brave Ellie, it read. One day, you'll realize your heart is bigger than this whole world. Don't let them dim it. She smiled, holding the card to her chest. She hadn't dimmed it. Not anymore. That night, she stood in front of her mirror, looked herself in the eyes, and whispered, "Happy birthday." Not because she needed to hear it from anyone else, but because she finally believed she was worth celebrating. And she was.